You finish dinner, feel heavy, and tell yourself you'll walk tomorrow. You've heard that walking is healthy. You may even exercise regularly, but somehow your blood sugar still rises after meals. Your energy crashes, and your waist refuses to cooperate. And then you blame yourself. Maybe you think you ate too much. Maybe you think you're getting older. Maybe you think your metabolism is simply broken. But what if the problem isn't how hard you exercise? What if it's what your body does during the first few minutes after you eat? Because after a meal, your bloodstream suddenly receives a delivery of fuel. Glucose rises, insulin rises. Your cells have to decide what to do with that incoming energy. And here's the part nobody talks about. Those first 10 minutes of movement can change the way your muscles handle that fuel. Not tomorrow, not after a month of training, right around the meal you just ate. That matters because repeated blood sugar spikes can create a very different biological environment from the one you think you're creating with a healthy diet. You can eat nutritious food and still spend hours sitting while your muscles barely use the glucose arriving in your blood. Your body isn't failing. That is precisely why this tiny habit can feel surprisingly powerful later. It's responding to the signals you give it. Think of your bloodstream as a highway after a delivery truck unloads a huge shipment. The glucose is the cargo, insulin is one of the traffic controllers, and your muscles are enormous warehouses. When you sit after eating, those warehouses aren't very active. The traffic controller has to work harder to move the cargo where it belongs. But when you walk, even gently, something fascinating happens. Your contracting muscles can pull glucose from the bloodstream through pathways that don't depend entirely on insulin. That is the mechanism we need to understand. The key player is a glucose transporter called GLUT4. Picture GLUT4 as a door hidden inside your muscle cells. When your muscles contract, signals help move those doors toward the cell's surface. Suddenly, glucose has more entrances, and this is where everything changes. You don't need to turn a 10-minute walk into a workout. You're simply giving your largest glucose-consuming tissue a reason to open its doors. Researchers have studied this effect for years, especially in people whose blood sugar regulation is already strained. And the broader biology fits what researchers at institutions like Stanford and Harvard have been investigating for decades. Movement changes how tissues respond to nutrients. But there's another layer, because the same meal can produce a very different glucose curve depending on what your muscles do afterward. Stay with me. This is the part that matters. The goal isn't to burn off dinner. That idea makes movement sound like punishment. The goal is to redirect incoming energy, and that distinction removes something important: guilt. You don't have to earn your food. You don't have to punish your body. You can simply help your body process what you already ate. But here's where it gets counterintuitive. The walk doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be fast, and it doesn't have to leave you sweating. A short, comfortable walk can create muscle contractions at exactly the moment your bloodstream is handling a fresh wave of nutrients. So the question becomes almost ridiculously simple. What happens if you make those 10 minutes automatic? Because the answer isn't just about glucose. It changes what happens next. And that next step is where the hidden benefit becomes much more interesting. The demand placed on your muscles changes. Every step contracts muscle fibers. Those contractions create signals that encourage GLUT4 transporters to move toward the surface of muscle cells. More transporters at the surface means more opportunity for glucose to leave the bloodstream and enter muscle tissue. That can blunt the rise in blood glucose after eating. And here's what most people completely miss. You're not necessarily changing the meal. You're changing the body's response to the meal. That's a powerful distinction. Your body was never waiting for a perfect diet. It was waiting for a useful signal, and walking provides one. The quiet villain here is prolonged sitting immediately after eating, because timing matters. If you eat and then remain motionless for a long stretch, your muscles are receiving plenty of fuel while demanding relatively little of it. That mismatch can make glucose remain elevated longer, but when you walk, your muscles become active consumers. The factory switches on. Here's what changes everything. Try this after your largest meal. Wait only long enough to finish eating and get comfortable, then walk for about 10 minutes. Keep the pace brisk enough that you feel warmer, but easy enough to speak in full sentences. Why? Because you're creating repeated muscle contractions without turning digestion into a stress event. At breakfast, lunch, or dinner, the principle is the same. If your meal contains carbohydrates, the timing becomes especially useful because glucose availability rises after those foods are digested. Pair the walk with a meal built around protein, fiber-rich vegetables, and minimally processed carbohydrates. The food slows the delivery. The walk increases muscle demand. Together, those signals are easier for your metabolism to handle. Then comes the evening. This is where consistency beats intensity. Don't wait until you feel motivated. Put the 10-minute walk directly after dinner. Your body responds to repetition. And over time, you're not just taking walks, you're repeatedly teaching your muscles to become better at handling incoming fuel. Here's the critical thing to understand. One walk won't transform your metabolism, but one walk repeated hundreds of times can become a meaningful biological pattern. That is how small signals compound. Meal, walk, muscle contraction, glucose uptake. Repeat. No punishment, no heroic workout. Just a small intervention placed at a powerful moment. And if you spent years believing your body stopped responding because you lacked discipline, let that belief go. Your biology is more adaptable than you were told. The next time you finish eating, don't immediately ask, "How do I burn this off?" Ask a better question. How can I help my body use it? 10 minutes may be enough to change the signal. And once you understand how timing changes metabolism, an even stranger question appears: what happens when you combine post-meal walking with the exact timing of your first meal the next day? Because the clock on your wall may be influencing your cells more than you realize. And that hidden timing signal is where the next metabolic mystery begins.